2 men ran to the tomb before dawn. One looked in and went home. The other stepped inside, saw the linen folded where a body should have been, believed something he could not yet name, and went home too. A woman was still standing outside the entrance when their footsteps faded into the olive grove. Nobody had asked her to stay. Nothing in that morning had promised her anything except more grief. And she stayed anyway. The stone is cold under her hand. She is leaning on it, because her legs will not hold her without it. The air inside the garden carries 2 smells that should not belong to the same place. The green, wet smell of new leaves after the spring rain, and the heavy oil and resin smell of myrrh and aloes from the burial cloths still inside. 75 Roman pounds of spices, John recorded in chapter 19, enough to bury a king, and none of it was needed anymore. By the end of these few minutes you're about to live through with her, 3 things will have moved. You will know what the Greek phrase me mu haptu actually forbids, and why almost every English translation softens it into something it does not say. You will know why Thomas was invited to touch him 8 days later when she was told to let him go. And you will know why the first human being entrusted with the news that death had been undone was a woman whose testimony no Roman court of the first century would have accepted as evidence. If this is the kind of slow, careful walk through the texts you have been waiting for, stay with this work. Subscribe. There is a great deal more coming. Now, back to the garden. The sun is barely above the eastern wall. The other women have already left for the city. The 2 men she ran to find, Simon Peter and the one John calls the disciple Jesus loved, have done what men do when something does not make sense. They have gone back to confer, to think, to wait for instruction. She has no instruction. She has no plan. She has the empty grave of the only person who ever called her out of what she used to be. And she has tears that will not stop. And she has the strange refusal of her feet to move. Grief has its own physics. It pins a person to the ground in places that should be unbearable to remain. She bends down. She looks inside one more time. She is not expecting to see anything she has not already seen. That is the thing about her. The detail Mark and Luke and John all preserve without comment. She keeps looking. After Peter looked once, after John looked once, after everyone else accepted what the empty space inside that tomb appeared to mean. She looks again, and the morning is about to answer her in a way she could never have prepared for. 2 figures are sitting where the body had been, white, one at the head, one at the feet. The Greek word John uses for their clothing, leukois, is the same word the Gospels use for the brightness on the mountain when Jesus was transfigured. This is not ordinary cloth. This is the light of another country, folded into human shape, sitting in a borrowed grave at sunrise. And Mary looks at them, and nothing happens to her. Read every other angel encounter in the 4 Gospels. Zechariah in the temple struck mute with terror. The shepherds outside Bethlehem, falling on their faces in a field. The women at this same tomb in Matthew's account. The guards collapsing like dead men. The pattern is so consistent that the first words angels almost always have to speak are, "Do not be afraid." These 2 do not say it. They do not need to, because the woman in front of them is not afraid. She is something heavier than afraid. They ask her one question, "Woman, why are you weeping?" It is the gentlest question in the entire chapter. And she answers them the way she would answer a stranger in the marketplace who had stopped her to ask for directions. They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him. That is all. No gasp, no recognition, no falling to her knees. She speaks to messengers from the throne of God as if they were two gardeners on a break. Sit with that for a moment, because what it tells you about her is also what it tells you about what grief does. Grief narrows the world to one missing thing. Everything else, even glory, even light, even the architecture of heaven sitting 3 feet away from you in a stone room, becomes background. If you are carrying a loss right now that has narrowed your world like that, you already know what I mean. The well-meaning sentences slide off you. The verses people send do not land. People keep telling you about all the good still around you, and you cannot make your eyes focus on any of it because the one face you're looking for is not in the room. That is where she is standing, and here is what should stop you. The angels do not correct her. They do not say, "Look up, woman, do you not see who is speaking to you?" They do not rebuke the dullness of her sight. John records no second sentence from them at all. They ask their question, and they let her answer stand. Heaven does not shame a grieving woman for failing to be impressed by it. Heaven waits, because heaven knows what she does not yet know, that the answer to her tears is not sitting inside this tomb in white. The answer is standing behind her, in the garden, breathing, and in the next breath she is going to turn around. She turns. Something, a footstep behind her, a shift in the light, a presence she could feel before she could see, pulls her around. And there he is, the man she has been weeping for, standing on the path, close enough to touch, and she does not know him. John writes it flatly, without softening. She did not know that it was Jesus. 3 explanations have been offered for this for 2,000 years, and the text refuses to settle on any of them. Maybe her eyes were swollen shut from crying through the night and into the morning. Maybe the early sun was behind him and his face was in shadow. Maybe, and this is what John seems most willing to suggest without saying, the body in front of her was not exactly the body she had watched come down from the cross. It was him. It was unmistakably him. And it was also somehow other, the way a face you have known your whole life can become unfamiliar for a half-second when you see it in a different light. John does not choose. He lets the mystery stand. He asks her the same question the messengers in white had asked, almost word for word. "Woman, why are you weeping?" And then one more. "Whom are you seeking?" She does not answer the second question. She makes a request instead. And this is the line that should put your hand over your mouth. "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him." Take him. This woman, alone, with no help, no cart, no shroud, is offering to carry a grown man's corpse out of a stranger's garden by herself. She does not know how. She does not know where. She is not thinking about the weight. Love does not calculate weight. It just says, "Give him to me, and I will figure it out." And here is the irony John has been building since the first verse of his book. She is asking the gardener for the body. The gardener, in Greek, kepuros, the keeper of a kepos, a garden. John, who opened his gospel by echoing Genesis 1, in the beginning, has now placed the risen Christ in a garden at the dawn of the new week, asked for by name. The first Adam was put into a garden in Genesis 2 to keep it. The last Adam stands in another garden as keeper of a tomb that has just released its prisoner. Mary cannot see it yet, but John can, and he writes the scene so that anyone reading slowly will catch what she missed. The gardener she is begging for help is the one who planted the first garden. The body she wants to carry is the body that just walked itself out of the grave. And the man she does not recognize is one syllable away from saying the only word that will undo 2 days of darkness, her name. He says one word, Miriam, not the Greek Maria the rest of the chapter uses, the Aramaic. The name her mother would have called her at the door at dusk. The name he had used 100 times on the road from Galilee, and the entire garden tilts. Everything she could not see 2 seconds ago is suddenly the only thing she can see. The swollen eyes clear, the shadowed face resolves. The stranger in front of her becomes the one face she has been searching for since before the sun came up. She answers him in the same language, Rabboni, my teacher, not rabbi, the formal title she might use in the temple courts. Rabboni, the warmer, more intimate form, the one a student uses for the master who has shaped her life. John, writing his gospel 60 years later in Greek, refuses to translate either word. He leaves them sitting in Aramaic on the page, untouched, the way you leave a sacred object untouched. He wants the people reading this in Ephesus and Antioch and Alexandria to hear the actual sound of what passed between them. 2 words, Miriam, Rabboni. That is the entire conversation, and the entire conversation is enough. Now think about something he wrote 10 chapters earlier. In the 10th chapter of his gospel, John recorded Jesus saying, He is the good shepherd, and the good shepherd calls his own sheep by name, and they know his voice, and they follow him. People had read that line as poetry, pastoral imagery, a nice metaphor for belonging. In chapter 20, he shows you what it actually looks like when it happens. A woman who could not recognize the risen Christ when he stood in front of her and asked her 2 reasonable questions. One word in her own language, spoken by the voice that had named her before, and she is on her feet, undone, restored, recognizing. There is someone listening to this who has been waiting a long time to be seen like that. Not lectured, not corrected, not handed another reading list of verses, just called by the name your mother used. The name only 1 or 2 people in your life ever really said out loud. The name underneath all the roles and titles and reputations you carry around to keep the world at a manageable distance. You have been a son, a daughter, a colleague, a patient, a problem, a category. You have not been Miriam in a long time. And the strange truth this scene is built on is that he already knows the name. He has known it since before the garden. He has been waiting for the moment your ears could hear him say it. She does not say anything else. She does not deliver a speech. She does not ask the questions that any reasonable mind would ask a person who was dead 2 days ago. She does what people do when they have just been recognized after thinking they would never be recognized again. She reaches for him. Her hands are already on him. The text does not say it directly, but the grammar of what he says next leaves no other possibility. 3 words come out of his mouth, and they are the words almost every English Bible has been quietly mistranslating for 400 years. Memo haptu. Most of your Bibles render that as do not touch me, as if she were reaching, and he were stopping the reach before it landed, as if there were still a half inch of air between her fingers and his arm. That is not what the Greek does. The verb haptu is a present imperative, and a present imperative in Koine Greek used with the negative particle me does one specific thing. It commands the cessation of an action already in progress. Not begin, not to touch. Stop touching. Stop clinging. Let go of me. She had already lunged. Her arms were already around him. Her face was already pressed into the rough weave of whatever he was wearing. She had heard her name, and she had done the only thing a heart in her condition could do. She had grabbed him, and she was not planning to let go ever again. And he, gently, firmly, with an authority that did not flinch from love, but did not bend to it either, told her to release. Sit with how strange that is. He had let women anoint his feet at table. He had let a woman with 12 years of bleeding press through a crowd to grasp the hem of his cloak. He had taken children onto his knees. He had washed feet with his own hands 4 nights ago. Touch was never the obstacle, until this morning. Something about the body she was holding had changed. Not less real, more real. Real in a way that belonged to a different order of things. Glorified, the older theologians called it. The same flesh that had bled out on the cross at 3 in the afternoon on Friday, now standing in front of her, but no longer governed by the rules her hands had always known. He explains himself in the same breath. For I have not yet ascended to the Father. He is in transit. 40 days from this conversation, the book of Acts records, he will rise from the Mount of Olives, and the cloud will receive him out of their sight. This morning is the threshold. He is risen, but he has not yet returned. And the kind of holding she wants, the embrace that keeps him on this side of the grave forever, the arms that say, I just got you back, and I will not survive losing you twice, is a holding the moment cannot bear. He is not refusing her love. He is refusing the version of love that needs him to stay frozen in the form she had finally accepted. There is a person listening who knows exactly what kind of grip that is. The one you have on a marriage that ended a year ago. The one you have on the version of your child that existed before the diagnosis. The one you have on the picture of God you carried at 23 and have been white-knuckling ever since. Stop holding, not because the love was wrong, because what is coming next requires open hands. 8 days later, in a locked upper room in Jerusalem, Jesus walks through a wall. The doors are bolted from the inside. John records this twice, in verses 19 and 26 of chapter 20, as if to make sure no one mistakes it for a man slipping through a curtain. The same risen body that told a weeping woman in a garden to let go of him now stands in the middle of a stale room that smells of lamp oil and unwashed wool and turns to one specific man, Thomas, the one who had not been there the first time, the one who had said out loud what the others were probably thinking quietly. Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my finger into the mark, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. And here is the line that should make you stop and reread it. Reach your finger here and look at my hands. Reach your hand here and put it into my side. The same Lord who had pulled himself away from a woman's embrace 8 mornings earlier is now offering his open wounds to a man's fingers. Why? The garden was not about touch as a category. It was about what each person needed. She needed to release a body she had been mourning for 36 hours straight, because the relationship she had with him could not stay in the form it had taken before Friday afternoon. He was about to leave for the Father. She was being prepared to live without seeing him in the way she had always seen him. Holding harder would have made that impossible. So he asked her to loosen her arms. He needed to grow her into a love that did not require physical custody. Thomas needed the opposite. Thomas had not been holding too tightly. Thomas had not been holding at all. He had been keeping his distance because the disappointment of Friday had been more than he could absorb a second time, and he was not going to let his heart get within reach of another grave. He had built a wall of conditions, fingers in the nail marks, hand in the side, precisely so that nothing softer than evidence could break him open again. So Jesus walked through one wall to dismantle another. He did not rebuke Thomas. He did not lecture him about the superiority of unseen belief. He met the conditions, every single one of them. He gave the man with closed hands a body to put his hands inside. The pattern is almost unbearable when you see it. To the one already holding on with everything she had, let go. To the one refusing to reach at all, touch me. He gives each person the one thing the other one was given the opposite of. Because the Christ who walked out of the grave that morning is not in the business of issuing the same instruction to every soul standing in front of him. He sees what is actually in your hands, and he asks you for the one specific motion that will set you free. Now back to the garden, because the sentence does not stop where most people remember it stopping. He told her to release him, and in the same breath, without a pause, he told her what to do with the arms she had just been asked to open. Go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. That is the full instruction, not just let go. Let go and run. Let go and carry. Let go and become the mouth that speaks the most important sentence ever spoken on earth. And here is what the first century would have done with that decision. In Roman jurisprudence of the first century, women could not give legal testimony in most matters. The historian Josephus, writing in the late first century from Rome, recorded the principle bluntly: let not the testimony of women be admitted on account of the levity and boldness of their sex. Jewish courts of the same period operated under similar restrictions. A woman's word, in a formal proceeding, was treated as unreliable by definition. If you wanted to construct a story that would be believed by educated Greeks, persuasive to Roman officials, and acceptable to Jewish authorities, the last thing you would do is build the foundation of that story on the testimony of a woman. And that is exactly what all four gospel writers did. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, every single one of them, preserved the fact that women, with Mary Magdalene named first or among the first, were the original witnesses to the empty tomb, and in 3 of the 4, the first to encounter the risen Christ. They kept the detail when keeping the detail made their argument harder. They kept it because it had happened. There is no other reasonable explanation for that editorial decision. If the story had been invented, it would have been invented differently. It would have started with Peter, or with John, or with the centurion at the cross, anyone whose word a courtroom would accept. Instead, the church spent its first 3 centuries telling the world that the central event of human history was first announced by a woman whose word a courtroom would not accept. If you have ever been told your voice does not count, that you are too emotional, too involved, too close to the situation, too quiet, too much, not enough, sit inside what just happened in this garden. The risen Lord could have appointed any messenger. He chose the one whose testimony the world would dismiss. Not in spite of that, because of it. He has never been impressed by the credentials the world hands out. He hands out his own, and the first one he ever handed out after walking out of his own grave went to a woman whose hands he had just asked to open, and whose feet he was now sending into the city before the disciples even knew he was alive. So she ran. John's chapter 20, verse 18. Mary Magdalene came and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." The Greek verb there is angelusa, the verb from which we get the word angel, meaning one who carries a message. Heaven had sat in white inside the tomb that morning and said almost nothing. The first true angel of the morning was a woman in a dust-stained robe walking back into Jerusalem with the smell of myrrh still on her clothes and a sentence in her mouth that would outlive every empire on earth. I told you at the beginning 3 things would shift. Here they are. Mimo hapto does not mean do not touch. It means stop holding, the present imperative commanding the cessation of an embrace already in progress. And 400 years of softer English renderings have quietly hidden the strength of what he asked of her. Thomas was invited to put his fingers into the nail marks 8 days later because he was not holding at all. And the same Lord who asks one heart to open its hands asks another to dare a touch it has been refusing. And the first witness of the empty grave was a woman whose word no Roman court would have admitted, because the church received what happened, it did not engineer it. Now to the person on the other side of this, the marriage you are still trying to keep alive in the form it had 10 years ago, the grief that the calendar has not lifted on the schedule the well-meaning promised, the version of yourself you keep trying to walk back into, the one before the diagnosis or the firing or the day the phone rang, the prayer you have whispered for years and almost stopped expecting an answer to, the picture of God you held at 23 that has not been able to hold the weight of what life has handed you since. He is not asking you to love less. He is asking you to stop holding the form, open the hand, and then go. There is something he wants spoken in your specific city with your specific voice that no one else in the room is positioned to say. The instruction he gave that woman in that garden has never been rescinded. Let us pray. Father, we thank you for a morning that did not require us to be impressive, to be entrusted with everything. We admit the grip, the marriage, the child, the picture of you we have carried since we were young, and we admit how afraid we are of what our hands will feel like empty. Teach us, Mimo haptu, as you taught it to her, not less love, different love. Love that releases the form so the person can rise. Call us by the name our mothers used. Send us into the city before we feel ready. We have seen the Lord. Let that be enough. Amen. One last thing before you go. There were 3 places in this where the ground shifted. The present imperative hidden inside 3 Greek words. The contrast between a woman told to release and a man invited to touch, and the testimony heaven entrusted to a voice no court would hear. Tell me in the comments which one stayed with you. I want to know which moment landed. And next, we sit with the man who wept outside a different tomb 4 days too late, and what Jesus actually said to Martha at the door before he ever called Lazarus out.